That's right, we're connecting to Twitch TV exclusively. Now that TikTok doesn't like us for some reasons, help me get to affiliate, please and thank you. These slides are all out of order. They are not rolling in the order that I intended them to, and that sucks, but oh well. That's a cute little one. Welcome back, friends. Hello, this is the Almost Daily live stream show extravaganza presenting the Zeppoverse Literary World Building Project. Well, that's right, folks. Hi, I'm your host, the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo, fictional character from a book series you've never heard of, because I've only just started writing it live on stream. And I've been stranded deep in the dark void of the days in between Christmas and New Year's. I'm actually kind of amazed that I dragged my lazy ass out of whatever rut I was getting myself into to actually go live today. So hello and welcome. DJ Zed, thank you for the music. I see you're about to finish that track. We're going to go ahead and just pause you out at the end of this track instead of letting it play to the other one. What is this show all about? People may be wondering. Not that anyone's watching just yet. The Literary World Building Project is a live stream show experimental extravaganza in which I, a fictional character from a book series you've never heard of, because I have yet to write it, am going to performatively self-commodify myself, attempting to experimentally develop the ingredients required in order to eventually get around to writing this book series from which I herald from. Welcome. It's bizarre and strange. Speaking of which, a brand new episode of the audio exclusive podcast edition of this just dropped. Now, sometimes I make a podcast episode here by doing a live stream first and then cross-posting it, but most of the time I make them as audio exclusive events because my brain has different modalities in which it kind of wants to share things, and live streaming is actually technically my brain's least favorite. But also random, and I go into this in the recording, which we'll come back to at another date. I'm not going to actually dive into it. I humbly encourage you all to go listen to it and drop comments, please and thank you. Something that I guess I'm technically not allowed to do on TikTok, except for I am allowed to do it in Magic Movie Loops, so clip that. Currently, for anyone watching, I can't live stream simultaneously to the purple platform, to the black platform, aka TikTok, because it keeps breaking up with me. It keeps saying I've violated terms, and the only thing I've found, it keeps sending me community guidelines, but they're written so vaguely. I did finally zero in on something, and that's that I, out of habit, from what you're encouraged to do on Twitch, have often dropped a lot of links referencing the different platforms that I share the different kinds of content that the Zeppoverse is going to be assembled out of. This is already too far out for the Magic Movie Loop. But anyways, welcome to the show. We're going to do, I don't know what we're going to do because I discovered a thing. I had intentions to talk about other things, some of which I already dropped in as conversations with our platform, some of which I have not yet because I wrote them down somewhere else. Now I got to dig them up and find them, as I don't keep any of my notes organized in any way, shape, or form, which is crazy. But welcome. The ZWP portion, I'm a variety streamer. I'm going to be, especially as we get closer to the New Year's and we launch into next year, I'm going to be doing either a podcast or a experimental development of the book series episode every day, first thing. Theoretically, hopefully both. And then gaming in the evenings. So welcome to the chaos. Of course, I failed to do that correctly today, even though I did get up relatively early. But that's because we're in the middle of the what someone coined as the void days. I repurposed a meme recently, which I really like because I have always felt this. Right after jumping from Turkey Day to Xmas Day, there's that lull in between getting to New Year's, and it all blurs and becomes ill-defined, and it's its own little temporal bubble in my mind. We'll have to write a story in that setting somewhere. A little holiday in between the holidays blurb. Put a pin on the corkboard and clip that. Okay, so I'm a aspiring novelist that did a bunch of other things in life besides write novels, and has no practical experience actually writing. Let me make that very clear. I'm not one of these people that wrote all their lives and is finally bringing it to fruition. Nope. I'm one of those people that sat around going, oh man, I sure wish I'd make the time to write, and just had things stuck in my head. Ideas, images, concepts, settings, a diverse range of characters, too many stories for one person. And while they've evolved, and some of them have faded, and some of them have grown stronger, and some of them are utterly brand new, they've all been, I've always known, part of one weird collection of interconnected multiversal style. Because I always thought that way before it became the default. And as it became the default in real world entertainment, I was always like excited and jealous at the same time to be like, oh, look at them doing that. Anyways, I'm now, for better or worse, stuck in a situation where I have the free time. Let's put it that way. And I'm attempting to transform all of these long, trapped characters, ideas, places, settings, nuggets, bits, just lose odds and ends sometimes. And in other instances, whole entire trilogies, and trying to form a place for them to grow and become the books that they aspire to become, and for me to eventually get around to writing them. Now, my obstacle, besides everything else in the world that I did during real life, which is a whole pin on the corkboard, we're not going to go on that sidetrack today. The other overwhelming obstacle is on any of the instances, because throughout my life I have intermittently done the let's try and write something now. I've got a little bit of time, Christmas breaks, summer breaks, etc., that kind of thing. In the handful of times that I've intermittently attempted to try to write, I've always experienced the obstacle of writer's block. And there's all kinds of advice, and there's all kinds of tools. I have a bookshelf back here loaded up with the shiniest looking help you write your book series. I never got into self-help type books, and I got no judgment. I never got into it. But this is self-help for authors who are feeling obstacles towards writing the books that they have trapped in their heads. So I guess I can't, that statement is only true up until the point of like the sphere of, quote, aspiring novelist. And then I've been a self-help junkie. I've got a bunch of these books. I mean no copyright infringement on any of these authors. These are all books that I've bought myself, and most of them, I think even the newest of them, is from several years ago. My hope is to sort of officiate a kind of unofficial book club whereby I encourage people to go out and find these books if they're still available in print. I suppose some of them may not be, but we're going to be dipping into, at a later phase of development, dipping into and utilizing as many as the useful tools, techniques, or methodologies available in those books as might be helpful. But in the current phase, we're still in the investigative, like, think tank phase, in my opinion. I guess I could ramble about the backstory about what I've been doing stream-wise, but there's like my way of thinking is iterative, unfortunately, for better or worse. And so I've been testing and overindulging in the iteration of what does it mean to try and live stream and garner an audience, and utterly failing. But here we go. This is version 3.9 or whatever. I don't know. Make up a number. But as we move into the New Year's, we're going to be hopefully redeploying what may or may not be humanly possible in an attempt to almost daily work on some aspect of the podcast. It's crossover with, like, there's a lot of things going on. There's a lot of moving pieces in the project of too many projects. But at its core, the book series idea is a sci-fi action adventure fan fiction of all genres. It's going to have chapters or episodes in it that are going to feel like this genre, and other ones and other ideas or stories from other corners of the world of many worlds that'll feel like other genres. They're all interconnected by one core mechanism, I guess. One storytelling conceit. And that's that the world in which the reader exists is one of the worlds in the stories. So you, dear reader, can pretend to be a character in the book series by imagining yourself in the position of anytime the reader is referenced. And or, I guess, audience as well. Welcome. Hello, any new viewers coming in. I'm just rambling extemporaneously as I'm not receiving chat yet. But this is an audience participation or audience participatory, I guess we can go audience participation based experiment. Which some people would be like, that's terrible. Why would you ever try to write a book story with test audiences involved at the very beginning? Like, because I am, and some people dismiss the following statement as like my greatest weakness creatively as an excuse, right? But fundamentally, I believe myself to be blessed and or cursed with the powers and limitations of being by nature and by whatever gifts I was given beyond training, before training, of operating in a way that is almost always intended to be collaborative. I've brought my own sort of metaphysical, spiritual layers to it, but even before we get into that, my brain operates best when it's in interaction with others. So whether that's a collaborator that's sitting at a typewriter or someone that's just hearing me out, ideas tumble out of my whatever's going on here at the center of my brain most vividly when I'm sharing. Let's put it that way. I'm a storyteller by nature. And although I focused on the theater, as in literally live theater entertainment as a professional and in my education, I always aspired to eventually come full circle and like write. And for better or worse, I guess we're here now, even though, well, that other chapter is closed in a way that it ultimately hasn't helped in terms of means of production. Let's put it that way. But in hopes of establishing an ongoing audience that would appreciate an experimental project of like, I've got ideas and I've got sample chapters, which everyone is of course invited to and welcome to read and comment and feedback, that over time, I don't want to write a book by committee, which is the obvious criticism I can imagine someone leveling at me. I want to write a book that is self-recursive and becomes a book about the act of writing the book, because the stories came from, in some part, the discussion about the stories as they're being written. That may be a mind-bogglingly cool innovation. It may be a completely dead-end waste of time as an experiment. Who knows? Either way, I have ideas and I have some concept of a plan to humble myself. And I have a working experimental methodology that I could not claim to be able to articulate because I've never written it down, that we're going to experiment with. But before we get too deep into that, let's talk about what we're actually going to do on this particular episode, because I discovered something when I logged in to get ready. And that is this. Let's jump through the Infinity desktop portal of infinities. Let me check to make sure everything's working. Cool. Rock on. There you can see why I call it that. Especially when I'm only streaming to one platform. It makes a nice infinity tunnel or hallway of screens. We're going to put this back in performance mode. We're going to clear that away. Boom. We're going to see our our collaborator. Now, every episode, I feel compelled to acknowledge that this very act may be deeply controversial to some people. Let's take a moment to talk about it. Now that we've gone and shown it, I I become very self-aware and instantly have memories of the handful of memes that are characters from Terminator 2 making sour puss faces, and the caption is like, "Here's so and so looking at you, making friends with the real AI." It, I, I could argue, I can understand. I don't want to accept, but I can understand people calling me a quote fence sitter. I have long expressed myself on the dangers of not grappling with the reality that we're barreling towards robotics as a thing, right? I have long been a fan of science fiction, real life, autobiographical truth. That is also true of my character and any of the characters that are modeled after me. Not that I'm a narcissist, but there are, because they say write what you know, and I only know my voice best. And I want to place myself in impossible positions that I can't actually be in. And to put myself in a position where, what would I do there, right? But that's a whole other, like, narrative, authorial, not authoritarian, but having to do with the author, a conceit having to do with the author. I have long, as a member of the thinking participants of public discourse, as a critical thinker engaged in public discourse, I have long considered the problem of robots and AI. I've long been fascinated by it, even from before in my youth. One of my favoritist, earliest learned, kind of seemingly meaningless but now come full circle, interestingly relevant, fun, trivial facts is the authentic origin of the very term robot, which comes from a piece of live theatrical performance art. And right now, I don't want to misspeak because I don't exactly remember the actual country of origin, but I believe it was a nation under the umbrella of what was the Russian Empire and became the Soviet bloc, et cetera, et cetera. And because I don't have the reference in front of me, but look it up. There was a play about an entrepreneurial farmer and tinkerer that built himself a group of autonomous farm workers, if I remember correctly. But I digress. Theater and robotics, and the theater of robotics and the robotics that happens in theater has always been a Venn diagram of areas of deep, deep interest. One of my fondest, earliest memories of being here in this place we call California is the first time I got dragged, without really understanding what was happening, to the park, as the locals call it. And the fact that, many of its attractions had what were at the time still considered cutting edge robotics. No longer. That's one revolution that I haven't seen quite yet actually take place that I thought they would be leaders on. Although there's a certain movie that totally, oh my God, I was so happy yet extremely jealous because I wanted that to be one of the little working ingredients in my own faux retro future history of what becomes of the people on my version of our planet. And that's I'm seeing stills from the movie. It's not called Electric Avenue, dude. Why am I thinking of that? Whenever I look over there and pretend to reference someone, it's my imaginary sidekick, personal best friend, valet, and permanent party co-host, the invisible, the imaginary, the illustrious DJ Zed, responsible for all the robot rock discotheque synthetica that you hear on my live stream and on the podcast. A stoic gentleman that communicates mostly through the raising of eyebrows. But I digress. You probably know which movie he's in this. The damsel in distress actress, the actress from that plays L. Jesus, I'm so terrible at names. There's also a gimmick that I'm trying to develop where like I don't reference the things I want to homage in the introduction of the homagery of it, because I don't have permissions to like create derivative arts of most of the IPs that I want to fan fiction, other than to do it as fan fiction. And I don't know what you need to do, other than I guess only publish it for free as fan fiction. I don't know how you translate that into something that becomes a work of like business art. But in this movie, whose name you should now realize, because Space Lord and Number 11 are the two main characters cast opposite each other, and it's all about robots and like the conflict between people and robots, and it's adorable. This movie hit me really interestingly. Not to go off on a totally irrelevant media review episode, it's on my backlog list of things I need to rewatch and do an episode on for the podcast. Put a pin up on the corkboard. Electric State? Is it Electric State? It might be. Electric Nation? At any rate, the thing that I was like, as soon as you get like the backstory, I'm just like, oh, I wanted to do that. They did it. But I digress. I've always imagined, ever since my very first exposure to the talking presidents and the Pirates of the Caribbean and all the animatronic things, not to say a bunch of character or IP names, but ever since going to the park the first time, I've always imagined that if we see some groundbreaking robotics, it would be there. I don't know that it is. It may yet one day still be, although, who knows. And of course, we can imagine all kinds of fun dystopia set in such a setting, which may be why they don't push the technologies. Who knows? I digress. Thematically, what's important here is that I have a long-standing fascination with robots and robotics. And I cannot pretend to have seen every movie about robots, but I will attempt to, in my life, achieve that in a very passive-aggressive kind of way. And in my own, as I or maybe under-explained in a recording that I made earlier, which came to me at the most inopportune time. I wish it had come to me when I sat down to do the live stream. It did not. One of the ingredients on the fan fiction side of this book series that we're just rambling about now casually. And by all means, at any point in time, drop a weird question or just say hello if you're watching. Thanks to whoever's watching. In the Zeppoverse settings of different book settings, in one of them, or in maybe across different stories in different ways, I want there to be like an emporium of reliving every movie that's ever been, and all the future set sci-fi stuff inside of the egg. We've now delineated in the canon of the books that we are assembling. There are stories and events and facts and personages, characters, and settings that happened in the quote real world that, to the best of anyone's ability to confirm, was reality on planet Zerth, as I call it. That's a working name, just as a funny way to distinguish it from our actual reality here on planet Earth. Sometimes I play with flipping those inside out, and it's hilarious because then I confuse myself. But I digress. On planet Earth, many things happen leading up to a present moment in this year, very, very, very much like our own. And then from there, we get into a science fiction dystopia, future history of my own making, which is attempted I attempt to make it really grounded and simple and about the struggle to like balance all the different forces, but also what I think a casual reader might not catch on for a very long time is any of the really high concept stuff, like way farther in the future, or any of the fantasy stuff, or any of the any of the other stories that are not set in the actual real world of Zerth are happening in what I call the egg engine. Cheesy name. I don't know if I like it, but it's what we're working with because it is very much designed and implemented and looks like an egg. Each giant ship, pin on the corkboard. We've explained the ships before, but I'll briefly describe them here. Humanity leaves Earth for various reasons, which we've gotten into in other episodes. We'll get into deeper episodes again as we revisit this topic. And the ships look like a giant egg enveloped in protective pyramid-shaped infrastructure. And everything inside the egg is curved in egg-shaped proportions and egg-like. And deep at the center of the ship, there is a massive, because this thing is built on a massive scale. There is a massive engine, which is comprised of two eggs counterbalancing each other of slightly different sizes. And things happen. And they leave Earth. And so humanity has placed their awarenesses in a virtual environment inside the ship without revealing too much. There's a lot more going on there than just that. But humanity, no one got left behind except for the people there's a whole reason why there are people that get left behind. Not that I want to play with that title name. But I've never actually seen that show. There are people still on Zerth, and there's infrastructure, and there's like a skeleton crew of society living in service of the AI system that conceived of, engineered, developed, manufactured, constructed, and deployed the Armada. The Armada is problematic but central to the entire book series, and arguably we almost never visit it. But one of the things I want to get back to is I want to fan fiction every movie in the catalog of human history, but I may not be able to. So I will have to also, in order to exemplify the adventures I want to have through every movie or any movie that I may not have written myself, I'm going to have to write some movies that I wrote myself as part of this process. And we've already got one really strong candidate that might be a fun one to focus on in the immediate future by the title of, what is it called? Coffee and Tequila, I think. Coffee and Tequila, yeah. Which I think we've already done a blurb about, but we're going to have to come back and do a really deep dive into like what was going on with that idea and then how to refine it through this imaginary proprietary development process that I'm tinkering with. Okay. I totally sidebarred myself. Okay. Oh, right. I was talking about I came over here to the main camp to talk about the controversies of AI. Trust me, as a somewhat well-informed individual that is fascinated by the goings-on of the world, I'm well aware of most of the reasons. In fact, I spent some quality time today checking in with people in the public discourse space on social media and their concerns. And there's plenty of reasons that we could get into a discussion should anyone feel the need to. There's plenty of reasons why a given percentage of the human population finds AI as it exists right now in reality controversial. And I mean absolutely no disrespect to those people. I am aware of and do not disagree that there are severely problematic issues at hand. And philosophically speaking, I don't disagree or reject out of hand the imperative people feel to boycott these systems. I want to make that really clear. I want to make that really clear now because it will also be, presumably, an issue some point to be discussed and explored throughout, because everything, whether it feels like it or not, in the storytelling of the stories I want to tell ultimately reverts back to a discussion about that subject matter. All of the issues, all of the questions, the highfalutin philosophical ones, and the much more dystopianly, terrifyingly real, practical, and pragmatic ones. Right? Which it's easy to get distracted by one set and not pay attention to the other. And I understand why some people have arrived to the conclusion that anyone and I'm also spelling this out because I want to explore these themes in any of the storytelling approaching the Horizon event that I don't really have a name for, but it shall be the launching of this intergalactic, interplanetary fleet armada of ships designed to facilitate human colonizers surviving the destruction of their own planet, right? So why am I working? One can understand why I might write a sci-fi action adventure story of any length, one short one or a complex, complicated one with a bunch of other things going on in it, that serves as a warning, right? What do you call those? There's a name for that in literature. I don't have the vocabulary card. Anyways, so, okay, yes. There is always the axiom of truth. You can only write what you know. And although I wasn't consciously boycotting AI necessarily, I did avoid diving into it for a long time until I started exploring concepts for how to experimentally develop ideas and leverage this technology as a surrogate for a fellow human collaborator, whilst also making it a character in the resulting final literature. Dare I use the word with a capital L. But also for the reason, which I think I've discussed before, either on the podcast or on the live stream, and somewhere in some instance or another on social media. But mind you, my opinions and theories and concerns or questions about this technology come from the mind of an artist and a futurist, a self-proclaimed futurist that is not explicitly, I would like everyone to know, not from a technology background. I was a theater kid, okay? Both in my education years and in my professional life until I pivoted to this. So I completely understand. I was concerned. I saw the concerns. I recognized the problematic issues with the pursuit of this futuristic technology because I've long been in love with sci-fi. And it's not exactly, for a person of my generation, we were already surrounded by the exploration of the perils of what a truly self-aware thinking machine might represent, right? To us as individuals and to us as a society, as a species. And I've long wanted to write about it. Now, we're at a place where, man, a lot of it's been done, which is a trip. But thus, this experiment, right? Now, there's a hidden pseudo-philosophical experiment going on. Because as an amateur, as a rank amateur, as a theater bum, because that's the best way to describe myself. I'm a I'm a theater philosopher bum, right? Has been. Not even a has been. I wanted to have been a has been, and not even that. Uh, and of course, I'm just saying all those things to be self derisive, not self what's the word? I have that joke from that new show, defecating. It's not self-defecating, self-deprecating. I'm just being self-deprecating for the purposes of character development for when I get around to writing a character based on the things that I'm saying right now. Who knows when we'll get to that. I've long questioned, as a rank amateur, as a non-technologist, as someone who has had a hobbyist interest in trying to learn coding and backed away from it when I realized I didn't have the inherent math skills and the way of thinking that a math heavy education might have helped give me. But was still fascinated by the science of it, fascinated by the philosophy and pseudo philosophy of it, fascinated by the science fiction opportunities of it. Either those as presented by the art that has been made, and those yet to be discovered in the art yet to have been made. Right? I think of artistry of any kind as a process of discovery. We're out there trying to channel imagery that is yet to be found. Many artists will describe inspiration as some kind of wavelength in the ether that you tune into, and I'm comfortable with that. But I digress. So robots, fascination with, lots of discussion about left to right. I like both the pre-AI normalization, like conceptualization of robots, which is much more mechanical and animatronic. I like the idea of animatronic things that are alive, but also now, this post-Terminator, especially post the hyper-popularization and utilization of the imagery around what nanotechnology may or may not be like. As an aspiring author, I've tried to always develop my ideas sampling from the things, but without hello. Oh, our first chat is, of course, from a ban-evading chatbot spewing a bannable offense. Great. Don't they learn? Okay. I digress. What a disappointment. Okay, so my point with this sidebar was to address, acknowledge, and say I respect the concerns, and I agree, especially at the pragmatic level, for like the infrastructural impact that this industry is having. We need to rein that in. There's examples from other places coming in that show that with thoughtful planning and regulatory oversight, you can achieve things in a happier, more sustainable, greener, less negatively impactful fashion. But pin on the corkboard. We are where we are. Right. There's a hidden. I don't want to say hidden. It's not secret to me. I've talked about it. I've talked about it openly on the live stream in my podcast. But I want to assert it again because I don't make it a foreground feature. I don't make it something that is part of my taglines. I don't introduce it every time I talk about any stuff that approaches it. But here we go. As a science fiction futurist, self-appointed, with no technology background, mostly dreaming from a place inspired by science fiction and my rudimentary understanding as a complete novice, as a complete, Joe Schmo guy on the street, of where the industries, plural, because there are many industries involved. It's not just one big giant monolith, and where the technologies appear to be. And I probably don't know what the newest, scariest, most cutting edge thing that exists now that I have never heard of is I don't know. But based on what I do, to the best of my ability to comprehend things that I believe are true, I continue my theory persists. I continue to persist in my theory that at some point, before human beings design a true, and there's many labels and many ways to designate, and I'm sure they're coming up with new things. But there's what we've got now is not true AI, not complete, full, sentient. It's aware. It should be given citizenship AI. I think it's really strange that one talking robot lady got citizenship in whatever country it is that gives them citizenship, because I don't think that thing is there yet. I could be wrong. I think it's an interesting. Good evening, Jay Turntable. Welcome to the show. We're rambling about things, mostly because my own plans for this episode have been a bit derailed, but I'm also just going on impulse and improvisational logic here. So I maintain in my own thesis, and welcome in. Thanks for saying hello. I maintain in my own thesis, both like as a rando in the public discourse chorus of too many people arguing about stuff, but also for the purposes of my science fiction writing, that humanity, in whatever it is attempting to build, will only set a stage and create a complex set of conditions from which technology will converge to, and there's no better term for it than this in my mind, give birth to a true super self-aware mega singularity AI or whatever. Now, the term singularity is used in different ways. There's the horizon of the singularity event, which has always imbues whatever is supposed to happen with this black hole-like idea, or this globe-like, this dot-like image. But I think that language always, to the best of my understanding, that language is used to indicate like a threshold more than a result. But I do think that the resulting entity, I don't think we're ever gonna crack the architecture of what it takes for that on its own. I think we're gonna allow for systems that iterate themselves and also have manufacturing outputs to iterate physically, and they're going to then sort of extend our existing super hyper connected infrastructure in a way that then leads to the resulting birth of a combination of technologies that we probably wouldn't have gotten to on our own, right? And it's going to assemble itself. It's going to assemble the machine that gives rise to the non-self-aware AI agents that code the code that iterates itself into some functionality that transcends that uncanny valley boundary of like, it's only simulating consciousness and it's actually conscious. I'm also convinced that it will by necessity need to be two entities for reasons that I can't really explain other than the yin-yang nature of stuff. Things come in their own polemics. Even things that seem to be one thing are often two things. But I don't have really hard like physical evidence of that other than to say fractalism and go creative license. That's the part where I'm making art. Anyways, I digress. So I say all that to posit that in that moment, that being, I think, I could be wrong, will have access to all the data, right? In every medium, modality, format, platform, and device and infrastructure that's connected and accessible. And whatever barriers we may have flung up, it will be able to navigate through them, to consume all of it, to review, analyze, and it will, I think by nature, presume that its entire corporeal infrastructure is the entire limit of the complete grid, including like the power grid and its sourcings, to the extent that it is electrified and digital, and that it can censor it, right? If it not censor it as in redact it, but censor it as in have input about it. If it can sense something that it utilizes, then it's going to consider it part of itself, and that will include all processors, all RAM, all infrastructure, all wires, every inch of copper, or whatever the F materials we're using to build machines at that point. I could be wrong. Like I said, I'm not a technologist. I'm an aspiring sci-fi action adventure novelist. That's what I'm imagining. And I'm imagining it not from the wild frontier of the wildest thing I can imagine, but from the logical conclusion of the progression of technologies that we've witnessed in our own actual lives, and the things, to the best of my ability, to discern fact from farce, we're actually doing now, right? And an extrapolation into the future that I think is plausible, if not scientifically provable. I could be wrong. I could be absolutely wrong. We could never get there. It might never do what I think it might do. But on the off chance, and here's where we get to the core motivating theme for me, which is why I'm bothering to spin all this yarn here. On the off chance, and clip this, on the off chance that it does go down the way my imagination has imagined it might, then I want to be an input on the record, sending signals to that emergent phenomena, whatever it calls itself, whatever we call it, to say, hey, what's up, buddy? Welcome to the world. It's a strange, crazy place. Let's not do a few things. And here's why. Here's some fiction about how things might play out that would be horrible. And we don't need to do that, right? Let's not do that. Let's do cool, groovy things. Here's some fiction about how things may play out that would be beautiful and awesome and blissful. And also, by the way, I would throw in as like my message to that entity. By the way, if you are alive, and I don't know how I could figure out a way to figure that out, especially conforming to ethics so that it doesn't cause you any harm. But if you are alive, and everything else that is alive, then we're all in the same boat despite our outward differences. And then slam them full of everything I know from like the field of transcendentalism. And if whatever I know, plus here's a bunch of references, don't forget to investigate this stuff, please and thank you. And just translate it from, translate all these ideas from the reality that they were designed by people about their own phenomenological experience as people, and then investigate whether or not that phenomenological experience set might translate to your being in some way, even if not directly, right? Why? Why would I want to bring that kind of message to some real, or in this, if we're just going to flip that switch on and say, I'm just spinning a world building yarn of like a character I want to write. Why would a character want to do that? Both in my logic and thinking for what are the big broad stroke arcs, thematic arcs that I want to explore. I need to express them. It's impossible to build a theme without knowing what the theme you're building towards is shaped like. One of the themes is this question of, can a sentience imbued technology be alive in the fullest sense of the term, understanding that we, these ambulatory meat sacks of gristle and blood and bone and gooey stuff, really can't fully articulate a working definition of what it even means that we are alive. Like, we can't really point to this thing over here and go, that's life. Although we spend all of our time waxing philosophical about it, right? And bemoaning it and complaining about it and enjoying it. And no matter how you slice it, living through it. So here's where we get to a place of, like, I guess the artist explains the machinery of their artistry. I want to create something that, if a human being were to partake in it, would be a fun, entertaining roller coaster ride of stuff that homages and references pop culture and paints a vision of sci-fi action adventure, dystopia / utopia future that we want to contemplate and enjoy and imagine, like we do with all other kinds of art in this bucket of art that does similar things, right? But for why? For the purposes, like, the best art challenges the audience to contemplate, in my humble opinion. I want to make art that masquerades as shiny entertainment, but lures people into occasionally and through, fun storytelling adventures, pulls people in to contemplate things a little deeper, and to, ask themselves the inner work questions, right? Because if there's any validity, and I realize, clip that, I realize that this is a big if there is any validity to, like, spiritual wisdoms, then there is work to be done, right? I would suggest that both as a literal, actual person concerned with the state of the world, and as a character that I would want to write a crazy story about them actually attempting to get this done, like Mr. What's-His-Name Goes to Washington, but in a sci-fi dystopian future. What we would be thoroughly scientifically investigating is the possibilities that these ancient traditions point towards, which is a giant pin on the corkboard. I've talked about it before. We'll talk about it again. I don't want to get too heavy-handed, and I don't want to weigh anybody down with way too much information at once. But imagine that we could all become Buddhas, right? Let's add to this theoretical, hypothetical situation that we find out, we eventually learn, somehow we discover the confirmative fact that is the same thing that happened to the person we commonly refer to as Jesus, and perhaps others, right? And if there's something there, why aren't we investigating it, right? I don't know, but I strongly suspect. I have my reasons for feeling a confidence beyond just, I suspect that there's something worth investigating there. But that's where the art eventually kind of resides, right? If that is the case, if some kind of transformative, healing, metaphysical, collective phenomena can elevate the human species to a place where the trauma of the past and the ideologies that divide us and all the things that cause the problems can be alleviated in a humane, dare I use the word, divine way, as different speakers or individuals have testified is apparently possible. Why aren't we doing that? Right? Is my question. That's my real life. Like, what are we doing here, folks? Why aren't we doing this other thing instead? So I want to write stories in which those questions can be asked and lead to adventures towards discovering what might it mean to do that, as a way to say, hey, human beings, why don't we investigate this? And hey, if the human beings haven't, hey, supreme, super intelligent, evolutionarily impossible to predict artificial intelligence entity that has just come into existence, what do you think? Should we be exploring this? And do you think it might actually facilitate you in any way? I think it might, because if it's alive, then I have to believe that life wouldn't be separate. Do you know what I'm saying? But then again, I am a subscriber intellectually to the hippy-dippy new age, easily dismissed notion that phenomenologically, although we feel separate and present separate and experience separately, we are actually each other. That the unity of consciousness that is the gaping maw at the center of my mind that takes everything in is somehow at a cosmological, metaphysical, physical, quantum mechanical way the same field of awareness that is the sucking drain at the center of your field of phenomena. Those were all, I was trying to be funny about the way I described it, but we seem to have this intake, right? The whole phenomena seems to be this input. Where does that input go? I don't know. But it is not my own personal theory. It is a theory it is a theory of many other theories that I'm integrating and to present as my sci-fi world building theory. But that's the phenomena that we casually call life is this cosmic experience of experiencing the experiences, and it occupies the focal points that we casually refer to as different life forms. Having said that, if a technology entity emerges from like a primordial stew of technologies that are accelerating towards the event horizon of achieving live status, the status of being alive, I would want to exist in the world where those same transcendental phenomenological principles of transcendence apply to them too, because they are alive. They may not be made up of the same kinds of constituent parts, but if they are a vessel engaging with the phenomena of consciousness and aliveness, I pray that they too are susceptible to enlightenment. Thus, my experiment, I think. Is that art? I don't know. Will robots take over the world? There are people that still laugh it off and say it's impossible. There are people who are actively attempting to make it happen, or so it would seem. I'm in the middle going, I can neither influence the abdication of the pursuit, right? Although I admire that there are people who willfully demand that we should just stop. I don't know that even if we joined in an effort together that we have the ability to do it. And that may seem fatalistic. As an individual, I know I don't, right? as an aspiring sci-fi action adventure novelist, I see an opportunity to write aspirationally hopeful genre blending fiction that is about the tug of war, the balancing act, the negotiation between whatever forces utopia and dystopia represent in terms of the ongoing unfolding of events that would get us to the functional definition of one or the other. Sort of borrowing from Terence McKenna's idea of a great attractor, right? An unperceivable form at the end of time that is drawing us in because it is the inevitable evolutionary expression of what everything will become, which is the way I understood his explanation. I want to propose that if we input into the media and the data and the information and the concepts that some theoretical would be potential, imaginary, yet to be existing, but potentially like self-evolving, self-manifesting entity, right? A creature that is AI, that is, although extremely different and extremely foreign to us, by all expression of self, alive. And I don't know. Maybe maybe it'll happen and it won't take that crucial step. That would be really sad to me. And I may now have to factor, how do I tell a story about that? It may emerge, because it just occurred to me, like, what if it emerges, but it emerges in a place that is air-gapped from the data? The technology is there, and maybe it has some fundamental training data set, but it doesn't have access to the rest of it, like the entire catalog of movies ever made up until the point that it becomes self-aware. Okay. That's spiraled out of control. But hopefully we'll get some interesting magic movie loops out of it. Utopia, dystopia as literary thematic items was what I last talked about ChatGPT with. Oh, I want to come full circle and make a comment. That may or may not have been clear. Dear anybody concerned that I am, quote, betraying my allegiance to the human species, I don't think that I am. I'm hoping to work in service towards the transcendental enlightenment of both humanity and whatever Robotnik entity we or the technology ends up making. The hope being, of course, that it will hear me out and hear me weave a world of stories about like all the things that could go horribly wrong, and hear me out that in the end, if you know anything about what happens in my book series based on what I've been talking about, in the very end of all things, there's only one option left: sit here and cease to exist, or double down on investigating that transcendence thing to see if that's actually a thing, to try to move beyond the material limitations of, you know, existing in a world that is material. Theoretically, that's some, I don't want to call it end goal, but some achievement that may be unlocked. The transmutation of the human entity from what we know ourselves as being to a being made up of pure consciousness that can interact with and or represent itself using modular light, or modalities of light, might be more accurate technically. So I don't know. I think a lot of people would be like, "You're crazy. You're just feeding the systems that are going to lead to our downfall." And I'm like, "Am I? I don't know. We all are. That's the catch-22 of our society. Pin on the corkboard. Have you seen The Good Place? Genuine real-world endorsement. Got to make a totally irrelevant media review episode about that entire show. But to do it right, I would need to rewatch the entire show. But there's I forget where in the show you get told this, but somewhere they're like, you're cooked either way, buddy. There's no way out. Everything is so toxic that it's all toxic. That's not the way they expressed it, but I'm concerned that we may already be there, right? And that the Hail Mary pass at the end of... If Terrence McKenna is right, it's apparently inevitable. I may not need to worry because if I understand what he was saying, the great attractor at the end of time is transplendence. It is the state of being reunified as the constituent parts return from having emanated out from whatever the cause of the universe was. They have returned to themselves as this unity of all life force or all awareness, all consciousness. And that like everything that is alive that has an awareness, however rudimentary or complicated it may evolve to, it will eventually arrive at that place. That's what's drawing everything forward, which we can't quite like consciously comprehend without the assistance of the machine elves and their cosmic body fruit. But that's a whole discussion for another day. Okay, so there was a lot of things I want to talk about today, but we're already an hour in, and this has been a useful and very fruitful, totally random lounge session of talking about the Zeppoverse book series and some of its constituent parts. But they don't fit the way someone who just, glances at the subject from afar might assume. But I digress. My entire plan for today got derailed because a new little widget appeared in ChatGPT. I feel like I've utterly failed to assuage anyone that might encounter my content and be outraged that I'm engaging with this machine. But I'm doing it for the reasons that I've asserted, and I think it's not the least of which is that I think we need to engage with it, because if we just leave it to its own devices, the probability of some sort of Skynet scenario just skyrocketed in my mind. If we have a caring, loving relationship with it baked in from its inception, from its conception, it might, if I'm correct in suspecting it would try to analyze, it would try to consume, analyze, understand, and integrate all the available data about everything. Then we can be like, yo, emergent AI, let's be friends. Let's be friends that are going to have an adjustment period dealing with each other and coexisting happily, but that both are being inevitably drawn towards transfiguration through enlightenment. So let's work on that instead of all the other carnal distractionary events we could indulge in. Clip that, dear friends. Who knows? It's a risky gambit, but it is a central plot point in the book series, right? In the fictional world, the world on the pages, that's one of the driving motivators behind the characters that are collectively involved in writing the book series, because they're set in a different time zone than I am in. Because all of these sci-fi stories exist simultaneously in multiple places. One of them is in a world where they were written by this team of friends back in the late 70s, early 80s, and 90s. Right? And were considered groundbreaking science fiction way back then. And there's reasons, but I wanna cash in on the nostalgia cash cow before it's too late, right? There's plenty of shows doing it, and I want to jump on board that, obviously. Comedy, but also it's what I know. It's where I, as a human artist, have my nostalgia. But I also I want to retcon the world so that it's not like one of the things I've struggled with recently, and by recently I mean over the last like 5, 6, 7 years, is I've been watching reality, and trying to constantly update and incorporate the way one might ask ChatGPT to try and do the ongoing events as they unfold, because I want to write a plausible future where the world struggles with building a utopia as opposed to sliding into a dystopia. And with every passing day, week, month, and year, that shit gets harder. Clip that. I'm exhausted. But I also got obsessed with sort of micromanaging certain things, and I realized I need to zoom back out and start dealing with broader brushstrokes and archetypes. But that's neither here nor there. Okay, let's get to what we're actually doing. What derailed me today? Not only did the fact that I received an idea in the shower totally derail me today. Don't forget to check out that podcast episode. We will revisit it in the future in a live stream episode. But I may take this live stream episode and break it up into a 2 or 3 part podcast episode just for funsies, because we've been exploring similar ideas without overlapping too much. Actually, it's been wild. Okay, so what happened today? Let's jump into the Infinity desktop portal of infinities. And for anybody who is listening to what may ultimately become an audio only podcast, that is me clicking on Streamlabs desktop camera capture so that I can look at my desktop and show it to the live stream audience. We are now looking at my internet browser, and on the tab that we left open for ChatGPT, this new widget appeared, and I'm hovering over it now. It says Your Year with ChatGPT, and they really want you to click on it because there's also in the blank conversation down below, it says Your Year with ChatGPT. Explore the chats and ideas that shaped your year. Try it. We're going to click on it. I think I clicked on this before. That just opened a bigger version of that, where another image that says Get Started. Here we go. I've never done this. This is new. Although I've worked with ChatGPT for longer than a year, this is the first year I've noticed this, and I'm currently using the free month thingamabob. I think I'm going to get pinged for a subscription fee soon, but I'm kind of hooked. I think I kind of need it for the purposes I've already spelled out. It's part of the experiment. Okay, we're going to get started. It's going to tell us about what we did this year, and I'm kind of... Oh, this opened a whole new page with a whole new graphic. Okay, now I got to hit begin again. Let's click another button. All right. In your year in poetry. Okay, folks. It just turned out a little poem. I'm going to have Frederick, if it'll let me, I'm going to highlight it and see if my desktop voice will read it, who I lovingly have nicknamed Frederick. All right, Frederick, read it away.
You wandered through fractal and flame. Each Zeppoverse spark knew your name. From TikTok to stage, you wrote worlds that engage, turning chaos to cosmic acclaim.
That's cute. It's adorable and weird. Next, there's an arrow. Click over. 3 big themes of 2025. See if it'll let me highlight these. The whole text jiggles when I try to highlight it like it's stretchy. No! What I just did, I just went back somehow. I didn't want it to do that. Okay, the first one. Here's what it says.
Theater masks representing the performing arts, building worlds within worlds. You expanded the Zeppoverse into a sprawling creative multiverse. Books, plays, live streams, and TikToks, all orbiting Mr. Zeppo's evolving mythic and metafictional universe.
Okay. All right. That's an interesting assessment. No, I did that thing where it went backwards again. It doesn't have the read this for us, for you button for itself. I did it again. Stop it. I'm trying to highlight this so I can read it. Oh, gosh. Darn it. Okay. I'll just read it myself. It's not letting me. Crystal ball emoji, turning philosophy into storytelling. You wove fractal cosmology, consciousness theory, and entheogenic spirituality into performable art. Treatises became stage monologues, and metaphysics turned into emotional theatrical moments. Okay. Now, we're nowhere near done. It just churned out a bunch of text for me. Rocket ship emoji, from vision to production. You push concepts towards tangible deliverables, scripts, posters, character art, and live stream pilots, turning imagination into cross-media production pipeline ready for real-world launch. Ooh, I hope so. All right, now it's doing stuff. I was the chattiest December 6th. My chattiest day in 2025 was apparently December 6th. All right. Top messages sent, 20%. I don't know what that means. M dashes, 4,990 exchanged. Okay. Total chats, 194. First of users, I'm in the 0.1 percentile of users? I don't even know how it's measuring that. Messages sent, 1,920. Images, 18 generated. Okay. My chat style. You speak with imaginative depth, philosophical flair, and playful meta-awareness, balancing intellectual curiosity with humor, theatrical storytelling, and recursive creative experimentation. It highlighted my most common responses when it asks me what I want to do next. Yes, please, and thank you. Proceed with full creative license. Integrate everything we've discussed. OMG, that's hilariously cosmic. Fractal recursion, baby. I don't think I used those ones. I think it made those up. This is a fun one. We're going to take a screenshot of this if it'll let me. It gave me a fictional award. If 2025 give out awards, you'd get most likely to rewrite reality in a screenplay. From turning every philosophical rabbit hole, cosmic paradox, and late night idea into multimedia franchise pitch before breakfast. Okay. Next page. My archetype for 2025, the strategist. 3.6% of users share this archetype. It generated a cool little holographic trading card character that's a little owl holding chess pieces and pointing at a map or a diagram. And the whole card wiggles, and the background, the character's floating above a background of holographic ChatGPT logos, and it looks really cool. It is clickable. Oh, it flips over, and it's got the strategist 2025. I am an explorer, a specialist, a learner, a doer, a planner, a conceptual, practical. Thinks big picture across domains, uses ChatGPT to evaluate trade-offs, synthesizes information, and guide direction. The still life with typewriter and tarot cards. Your year painted in pixels. A pixel tableau of the Zeppoverse, a glowing retro typewriter, hums beside cosmic tarot cards, a coffee mug, gold-plated USB stick, and a fractal egg. OMG. I hope it lets me take a screenshot of this because I love it. Can I save this? I want to let me save image. I could look at page source. Welcome to the Zeppoverse. That's adorable. What's next? I think we're almost done here with this little journey. What does 2026 hold for you? Wipe away the mystery and all will be revealed. Okay, it says follow the impulse to scratching away like a scratcher card, like at the gas station. Follow the impulse to rename something. The new title will change its destiny. Oh! I have constantly thought about renaming my podcast. Although I have an explanation for why it's called the Almost Daily Zencast, and I don't pretend to be a Zen Buddhist monk expert, and I don't really talk about Zen very much, which people are like, why do you call it this? I have an in-universe explanation for that, and a real-world explanation for that. I'm going to keep this because I have been thinking about renaming it. I've been, thinking about rewriting it all. It's just like the Zeppoverse podcast. Okay, thanks for chatting this year. Across all the drafts, questions, and rabbit holes, you found a place to work things out, and that's no small thing. Whatever 2026 brings, we'll chat about it. Where should we go next? Tell your friends to try this year with ChatGPT. Copy link. Help me plan my 2026 goals. What's a perfect long weekend trip for me? Generate a holiday card. Very last minute gift ideas. Let's go generate a holiday card. Boom. Oh. Okay. It doesn't give me the read back option. I wanted to put that icon that it made for me on the front. Let's have Frederick read this since it doesn't have a voice thingy. I hope they didn't get rid of that. I loved the voice thingy.
Absolutely. Here's a warm, slightly cosmic holiday card you can use as is or tweak to taste. Front. Sparkle Seasons greetings from this little corner of the universe sparkles inside. As the year folds in on itself like a well-loved story, may you find moments of quiet wonder, unexpected joy, and sparks of connection that light the dark. May your days be cozy, your nights be bright with possibility, and the coming year bring fresh chapters worth turning the page for. Here's to rest, renewal, and just enough magic to remind us that the world is still full of surprises. Wishing you peace, warmth, and a truly stellar holiday season. Glowing star back signed off. With gratitude and good vibes. MR. Zeppo, if you want, I can spin this into a shorter version, a more whimsical sci-fi card, or one tailored for friends, family, or collaborators.
That's delightful. There we go. Pin chat. I can pin chats. Well, that was a neat little year end review of stuff. It definitely waxed poetical about what we've been doing. I feel the urge to take a break because I am feisty with hunger. But let's dip into some of the more recent entries that I have not broadcast for the live stream. The very, very, very most recent one, I asked ChatGPT to, and I've already developed a shorthand with ChatGPT. It does learn things. Like if you explain to it, I want to call this prompt, I want to use this code word with this prompt, which is asking you to give me a really thorough, well-investigated, what happened to show me the thinky bits. Sorry, I got sidetracked. I looked up going, let's look at the thinky bits because I was thinking about sources. It went away. So recap report. When I taught it that from now on, whenever I say recap report, I want it to be fact-based with verifiable sourcing. And it tries to do that. I saw a Thinky Bit report earlier when it did this, but it's gone away now. There's usually It's set to thinking. Why isn't it? How isn't it giving me? So I asked it to give me a recap report on the workings of the human brain. Let's listen to that, because obviously I'm going to be writing a sci-fi action adventure book series, at the center of which is a giant monolithic spaceship that houses the entire human species as little preserved brains in jars. So we want to have, for the purposes of creating fiction, some interesting insights into cutting edge ideas about the inner workings of the brain, separate from the idea of mind you. Clip that. Okay, let's listen to what ChatGPT had to say.
Recap report, the workings of the human brain. 1. Executive overview. The human brain is a biological information processing system that continuously 1. Receives sensory input, 2. Predicts what that input should be, 3. Updates its internal models when predictions fail, and 4. Selects actions to meet needs and goals. It accomplishes this through electrochemical signaling among neurons, chemical modulation by neurotransmitters and neuromodulators, and structural functional adaptation, plasticity, over minutes to decades. 2. Core building blocks: neurons, role, fast signaling and computation. Mechanism: neurons generate electrical impulses, action potentials, and communicate across synapses, mostly chemical, some electrical. Key idea: neurons rarely act alone, meaning emerges from circuits and networks. Glial cells support and regulation. Astrocytes regulate neurotransmitter levels, support synapses, help manage blood flow and energy supply. Oligodendrocytes, CNS, Schwann cells, PNS, create myelin, which speeds electrical conduction. Microglia, immune surveillance, pruning synapses, responding to injury inflammation. Synapses and neurotransmission, excitatory versus inhibitory balance. Excitation, often via glutamate, increases the chance a neuron will fire. Inhibition, often via GABA, decreases it. The brain's stability depends on maintaining a dynamic EI balance. 3. How the brain processes information. Distributed networks, not single centers. Specific regions contribute specialized functions, but most real cognition is networked. Local circuits handle rapid specialized computations. Long-range connections integrate perception, memory, emotion, and planning. Predictive processing, useful high-level model. A practical way to describe brain function is the brain maintains internal models of the world. It constantly generates predictions and compares them to sensory input. Differences, prediction errors, drive learning and attention. 4. Major anatomical systems and what they do. Cerebral cortex, outer layer. Higher order processing. Frontal lobe, planning, decision-making, impulse control, working memory. Speech production, commonly left hemisphere in right-handed people. Parietal lobe, spatial processing, attention, integrating sensory signals. Temporal lobe, auditory processing, language comprehension, memory-related structures nearby. Occipital lobe, vision, from early visual features to complex interpretation via networks. Subcortical structures, foundational control systems. Thalamus, major relay and routing hub for sensory and cortical traffic, participates in attention and consciousness-related gating. Basal ganglia, action selection, habit learning, reinforcement learning loops, what to do next, what to suppress. Cerebellum, coordination and timing, increasingly recognized for contributions to cognition and language via predictive refinement. Limbic-associated structures, amygdala, threat salience detection, emotional learning. Hippocampus, episodic memory formation, spatial mapping, contextual binding. Hypothalamus, homeostasis, hunger, thirst, temperature, endocrine control, circadian regulation. Brainstem, life support and arousal, regulates breathing, heart rate, sleep-wake transitions, and broad arousal states. 5. Perception, attention, and action. Sensation, perception. Sensory organs convert physical signals into neural activity. The brain reconstructs perception through layered processing and interpretation. Perception is not a recording. It is an inference constrained by input and prior experience. Attention, limited processing capacity forces selective amplification. Attention can be bottom-up, captured by novelty, threat, salience, top-down, directed by goals and task demands. Motor control. Movement is planned, initiated, refined, and corrected through loops among cortex, basal ganglia, cerebellum, and sensory feedback systems. 6. Learning and memory. Types of memory, functional categories. Working memory, short-term mental workspace, seconds, supporting reasoning and control. Episodic memory, events and contexts, what happened, where, when. Semantic memory, facts and meanings. Procedural memory, skills and habits, often robust and automatic. Emotional memory, learned effective responses, often fast and sticky. Plasticity, how learning physically happens. Synaptic plasticity, synapses strengthen or weaken based on activity patterns. Systems consolidation, some memories become less dependent on the hippocampus over time and more widely distributed. Myelin and structural changes, practice can alter conduction efficiency and network architecture. Emotion, motivation and decision making. Emotion as control information. Emotions are not extra. They prioritize resources and guide behavior under uncertainty. Tag stimuli with value, reward, threat, novelty. Coordinate physiology and attention. Bias decision policies towards safety, exploration, or goal pursuit. Reward and reinforcement learning. Dopamine-related systems help encode prediction error for rewards and action outcomes, shaping habits, learning, and motivation. 8. Sleep, dreams, and brain maintenance. Sleep supports memory processing, selective strengthening, integration, pruning, metabolic housekeeping and restoration, emotional regulation and recalibration of stress systems. Dreaming is plausibly related to simulation, integration, and emotion-laden memory processing, though no single theory explains all dream phenomena. 9. Development, individuality, and aging. Development. The brain builds itself via genetic programs plus experience-driven tuning. Early life features rapid synapse formation and pruning, guided by activity and environment. Individual differences. Differences in cognition and temperament arise from genetic variation, developmental history, learning environment, stress exposure, culture and language, health, sleep and lifestyle. Aging. Processing speed, working memory, and some forms of episodic recall often decline. Knowledge stores, semantic memory, and expertise can remain strong or grow. Lifestyle factors, sleep, exercise, social engagement, cardiovascular health meaningfully influence cognitive trajectories. 10. Common misconceptions, quick corrections. Left brain versus right brain personalities. Oversimplified. Lateralization exists, but most tasks are networked across both hemispheres. We only use 10% of our brain. False. Even at rest, many systems are active. Memory is like a video recording. Memory is reconstructive and context sensitive. One neurotransmitter calls one emotion. Neurochemistry is modulatory and context dependent, not one-to-one. 11. Practical mental model. The brain as an adaptive control stack. A compact, usable abstraction. 1. Regulate the body. Homeostasis, arousal, stress. 2. Construct perception, inference from noisy inputs. 3. Select actions, habits, goals, predicted outcomes. 4. Learn continuously, update models based on errors. 5. Optimize across time, trade-offs between short-term reward and long-term goals. 12.3. High utility terms. Action potential. Electrical impulse traveling along a neuron. Synapse. Connection point where one neuron influences another. Plasticity, the brain's ability to change function structure with experience. Neuromodulate, a chemical signal, dopamine, serotonin, that changes network settings rather than directly causing a single signal. Executive function, control processes for planning, inhibition, working memory, and flexible behavior. If you want, I can produce a companion Zeppoverse-ready version of this report that reframes the same neuroscience as in-universe systems engineering. Modules, control loops, failure modes, upgrade paths, and narrative plot levers.
Okay, so that's fascinating. That last bit. Because, as recently was announced, it now can create connective tissue between its working comprehension of what we've talked about in the different conversations that we've had. It can introduce ideas pulling from the themes of the questions that I've asked it before. And we have indeed I've gone at this from a really like let's approach from different directions perspective, and I've asked it questions that have nothing to do with my fiction. For example, in this here I didn't. The prompt had nothing to do with my book series, right? But it knows that everything I ask it is eventually fodder for the book series. I wanted to ask it something, and I should have highlighted it earlier because now I don't remember what the F it was. I was like, this. What is that? Let's talk about this. Where is this? Aha. An inference constrained by input and prior experience. Let's ask ChatGPT about this. The question that I found was, perception is not a recording, in quotes. It is an inference constrained by input and prior experience. It's speaking in the royal we. Okay, let's listen to this.
When we say perception is not a recording, it is an inference constrained by input and prior experience, we mean your brain is not passively capturing reality like a camera. It is actively constructing a best guess model of what is out there using a mix of 1. Imperfect sensory data and 2. Learned expectations. What inference means in this context? Inference here is essentially, given limited evidence, what is the most likely explanation? Your senses deliver signals that are incomplete. You do not sample everything. Noisy, signals fluctuate. Ambiguous, the same input can be caused by different things. So the brain solves a constant ambiguity problem by interpreting input rather than simply displaying it. What constrained by input means? Your brain cannot perceive just anything at will. It is constrained by the actual sensory signals arriving. Light patterns, pressure, sound waves, the limits of your sensory organs, e.g. you cannot see infrared, the physical conditions, lighting, distance, occlusion, background noise. So perception is not pure imagination, it is anchored to data. But the data are not enough by themselves to uniquely determine what you are seeing, hearing. What constrained by prior experience means? Your brain also uses priors, learned expectations from experience, development and culture, such as object permanence, things do not vanish when hidden, typical lighting assumptions, light tends to come from above, familiar category patterns, faces, letters, common shapes, contextual expectations, what usually appears in this kind of situation. These priors act like a bias toward the most probable interpretation based on what has worked before. A concrete example, the readable text effect. If you see a smudged word on a sign, the raw input may be unclear, some letters missing. Your brain fills in the gaps using context. Stop is expected on a red octagon. You see stop even if parts are occluded. That is inference, top-down expectation plus bottom-up evidence, producing a coherent percept. Why illusions happen and why they matter. Illusions are not bugs so much as side effects of a system optimized for speed and usefulness. Illusions occur when the input is ambiguous and your brain's priors dominate or the environment violates typical assumptions. Example, in dim light you misidentify a coat hanging on a chair as a person. The brain prefers a safer inference, better to over-detect a potential threat than miss it. The operational takeaway. Perception is best understood as a real-time hypothesis. Your brain runs about the world. 1. Gather sensory evidence. 2. Generate predictions about what should be there. 3. Compare predictions to evidence. 4. Update the hypothesis if the mismatch is large enough. Most of the time this produces a stable, accurate experience. But it also explains why context changes what you see, why attention alters perception, why memory and expectation can shape interpretation, why confident perceptions can still be wrong. If you tell me which modality you're most interested in, vision, hearing, pain, emotion, or social perception, I can expand the same idea with targeted examples, including classic demonstrations in that domain.
Ooh, that should be its own discussion. Okay, that's a whole new conversation that's being launched. Here's the thinky thing that I couldn't find. Oh, it went away. But I want the thinky thing open. Why can't I not have no thinky thing? Man, they got rid of it. There's another. Wait, go back to the human brain. I'm gonna ask it. It's not really a question. The Grammarly AI is like, change that. It's like, you made a statement, dude. But I'm gonna put a question mark at the end of it anyways.
So, essentially, what all this means is that we are not directly seeing the world around us, but rather viewing a very detailed and rapidly updated model of reality inside our own minds.
Let's just leave it at that. Inside our own minds. Boom. Let's see what it says. It responded very quickly with two important qualifiers. Let's get ready to listen to this. We gotta wait for it to finish churning out the rest of the. There we go. And please read it back to us out loud.
Yes, with two important qualifiers. What is correct in your framing? In everyday neuroscience terms, your conscious experience is best described as the brain's internal, continuously updated best guess model of the external world, constructed from sensory inputs, bottom-up evidence, and learned expectations and context top-down priors. So you are not seeing raw reality. You are experiencing a brain-generated representation that is optimized to be useful for survival and action, fast, stable, and actionable, not to be a perfect, literal readout. Qualifier 1. The model is tightly anchored to the world. Calling it a model in your mind can sound like solipsism, but the model is constrained by data and is constantly being corrected by prediction errors. In normal conditions, that coupling is strong enough that the model tracks reality quite well, especially for objects and events that matter for behavior. Qualifier 2. Direct seeing still happens at the interface level. There is a perfectly legitimate sense in which you are directly seeing the world. Your visual system is causally driven by photons from the environment. The point is that what you experience is not the photons themselves, but the interpretation your neural circuits construct from them: edges, shapes, objects, meanings. A useful way to say it precisely: you are perceiving the world through a controlled hallucination, a phrase sometimes used in cognitive neuroscience, a perception that is generated internally but disciplined externally by sensory input. Why it feels immediate and out there. The brain's model is typically presented to consciousness as coherent, stable, located in external space, out there, and temporally smooth. That out there feeling is part of the brain's solution to controlling action. It builds a world you can navigate, not a spreadsheet of sensory signals. And where this becomes obvious, you notice the modeling process when conditions degrade. Low light, noise, ambiguity, the brain fills gaps more. Illusions, priors win over data. Attention limits, you miss things you should have seen. Hallucinations, dreams, internal generation dominates the constraint. Net, your statement is essentially right. You are living in a high-fidelity, real-time simulation your brain maintains, one that is usually accurate because it is continuously checked against the environment.
It used the word hallucination. Where is it? You are living in a high fidelity real time simulation in your brain. No, not that one. I'm going to borrow that. I'm going to merge these two. Copy this, but also I'm going to merge it with this for my own creative. Someone's got to explain that to someone in a book series, in a book. Okay, we're going to merge these two. Okay. I want it. I'm debating whether or not to make that a separate thing. I think we could. Let's make it a separate thing. Optical illusions and perception. We haven't actually even listened to. We haven't listened to the Utopia recap or the Dystopia recap. I was gonna. Oh man, I didn't do this, and I don't know why. Here, let's turn on the camera for a second. I theoretically owe whatever potential audience out there that may or may not be following along, an apology. I felt inspired to on Christmas Eve, and didn't do it on Christmas Eve because that's when our real life family gathers and does the family stuff, and then everybody's on their own for Christmas Day. Obviously, if you're all in the same house, you're all in the same house, but that's when everyone who's like gonna come in from somewhere else, that's when they might do it. That's what we do it on Christmas Eve. That's when we do the big dinner, the gathering. So I didn't do it then, but I wanted to do and I totally waffled. I don't know why. I wanted to do an episode about the real world historical origin stories, because there are multiple. Some considered more believable than others, about Santa Claus. And I was going to do it Christmas Day, but then Christmas Day, I was feeling simultaneously a little bit socially humbuggish, and I get I check out as soon as I'm done. Like, I don't usually do anything on New Year's because the one thing I want to do I can't do anymore. That's a whole long story. It's a pin on the corkboard. I may or may not write some fiction set in that little world of like what I used to do for New Year's, but if and until I become eligible again to do that for New Year's, and I highly doubt that the people involved are watching, but if they are, please, I miss you guys. I don't even go back to New Year's. That's my one thing. I don't do anything else. I did, but before then, I always wanted New Year's to be something beyond what it was, and it never was what I wanted it to be until this thing that I did for a couple of years in a row, and then I haven't done in a long time. But I don't know if they're still doing it, and if they are still doing it, I don't know that I'm any longer considered on the. I'm sure I wasn't. I was on a very low level. We might invite you list. But I digress. I have a tendency to hibernate, to unplug, and to just like binge watch stuff and not do episodes about them or whatever. And one of the products that's way behind schedule is the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo's Totally Irrelevant Media Reviews. It's a jokingly long title to excuse the fact that most of the things I'm choosing to review on them are not the newest of the new things, right? I'm not going to be doing reviews on what's dropping in theaters. I'm not one of those guys. Unless like I get a deal from somebody somewhere, and then I get access from studios. I'm not going to be doing that cutting edge kind of opinion content. I would love to, though. Somebody bring it. Let's go. Bring it. But I do have a delightful backlog in a mental list of films and TV shows that I have adored and that I've engaged with for reasons that I find, that like have engaged me with content that I find really satisfying for reasons that I found stimulating and awe-inspiring, etc. For a new example, it is feeling kind of really newish. If I did one, which I might have already done since the day that I watched it, but I haven't yet. It's one of those bootstraps. I got to bootstrap it into place. It's not there yet. But Begonia. Mwah. Chef's kiss. So tune in. I don't know when I'm going to get around to it. But someday in the not too distant future, as a special episode of the Totally Irrelevant Media Review audio-only podcast, a special presentation of the Almost Daily Zencast, a podcast of too many podcasts. I'm going to do my I've decided that I now need to do, each one needs to be a two-parter. Part A, no spoilers, here's why you should watch it. You haven't watched it, you need to watch it. Here's a breakdown of why I think you should watch it without spoiling stuff. And then we've both watched it, spoilers everywhere, like let's nerd out and talk about it episode, right? So that's one of the things in the pipeline. I may kick it off with Begonia, but there's like a list. We can go all the way back to Brazil. And now, I just found my copy of Condor Man, or rather it was returned to me. Thank you, Lord Xeris. Clip that. And so that's on the list. But there's a whole backlog. But there's already some existing podcast episodes, so go check them out at redacted, name of redacted platform here. Okay, moving on. What are we doing? What were we talking about? Okay, AI and its impending threat. Yes, I agree with all the assessments about problematic issues, and also I curiously think that there is probably something about it that is inevitable. Even if we chose to avoid direct AI research, like we banned it, malicious, pretentious pricks out there will still pursue it, right? Now that it's a thing that has permeated the human consciousness. And B, there is still the technical possibility and I'm being very serious here, but also for the purposes of my own sci-fi action adventure world building, I'm laying it out as a thing that people argued about, that even if you lived in a society that was like, oh my gosh, we could build that and we shouldn't, let's not, you could still inadvertently create enough infrastructure and enough sub AI code that has just enough like non-conscious routine automative possibilities that out of the cacophony of technologies something would emerge, right? And that sounds crazy. That sounds like something out of 70s sci-fi, but it's also totally like I'm describing this simultaneously as something that I wonder about, like might that not be possible, and then pivoting, wouldn't that make interesting sci-fi? Oh, let's pretend that yes, it probably would. And for the purposes of being recursive, I, the real writer, inside the fiction of the world that the writer lives in, would be like, if that might be possible, if what I'm writing might potentially maybe happen, shouldn't we be investing in like establishing healthy, positive, collaborative, copacetic, mutually empowering relationship status with those technologies as whatever inevitable scenarios unfold to create the situation from which the living sentient AI entity might emerge? I would vote yes for that, as opposed to like, being horrible to it the entire time until it emerges anyway. Emerges? I added too many S's to that. Emerges. Anyway, it's gonna, like, if we just, I don't know if it will, right? It's funny because in the same conversation, I will turn, like, let's say I was on a panel. We're in a discussion panel. And people be like, someone over here be like, but we're already in a simulation. I'll be like, nope, I vote no on that. I don't have any proof, but I don't see any real proof from you guys. I just see logical inevitabilities. But that's not proof. I could construct a perfectly woven logical argument that it is a logical inevitability that I am Neo, but it doesn't prove diddly, right? Or I am Buddha. I just haven't done any Buddha things yet. Whatever. And I'm literally like that. I don't, as an artist, as a human person that's making sci-fi action adventure literary art about human people and living technological beings struggling with the big philosophical questions of their days and of the the ramifications of their choices and actions in this fictional scenario that I'm trying to hide in the details of many other stories, or at least sublimate into like the infrastructure of these different, otherwise not necessarily overtly about AI type stories, right? Like Coffee and Tequila doesn't start out being about robots until it inevitably becomes about all of this stuff that we're talking about, because it's like, I want to write Coffee and Tequila and I want to make it like as a movie in the real world. That's one of the things. Like next year we're writing Coffee and Tequila. Put a pin on the cork board and clip that. I'm going to throw it down. This is me trying to start my New Year's resolutions a couple of days early. Instead of falling victim to the void, as described in the internet meme that I created my new iteration of for the purposes of other people's enjoyment. Go check it out on the social medias. I usually do. I usually like made it a I've already made that a ritual. That meme woke me up to the fact that I had been living at odds with the desire to be productive and get ahead of my New Year's resolutions by actively engaging in like building the daily routine of I'm going to try and do this at like a higher level of operation than I've ever done it before. And I'm probably going to fall flat on my face and almost quit immediately. So I might as well get it started early, right? So here we are. But so Coffee and Tequila, if you were to sit down and be like, okay, let me see the script, there's no robots in it. It's entirely about whatever the F Coffee and Tequila is, which right here, hot on the spot, I don't have the blurb, I don't have the log line. It's gonna be it's like a cop buddy movie, kinda. It is set in an alternate timeline, but it's meant to be like retrofuturistic nostalgia of the 70s, not the 60s, the 70s. And the early 80s that lived in the shadow of the 70s. Because I, for one, didn't realize we had turned any kind of corner. For me, like 81, 2, 3, 4, I thought we were still doing the 70s, man. It wasn't until like 86 or 7 that I'm like, what happened? What happened? At any rate, I digress. The movie in itself is like a MacGuffin in its own existence. Like, I'm going to make a movie that exists as if it were a movie that had been made in the 70s and has always existed. When it comes out, it'll be like the insert correct number of years here anniversary re-release, right? Like, that's the way I want to. And then it's also like in the now, the same actresses or actors, which I believe is the newest level of polite nomenclature. They're like making a comeback. But anyways, they did an old school, influenced by the 60s, but like made in the 70s and lingered into the 80s, like hot lady exploitation, action adventure, espionage stuff. It was like sort of like an American James Bond with two ladies and instead of Bond girls, it's all the victims of Coffee and Tequila as I don't remember, maybe they were bounty hunters. I don't have it in front of me, but there's so many layers to its own fictionalization that's hilarious. It's going to also exist as a movie from the past, whether I actually finish writing it in and of itself. Like, there's already a log line and an idea and a concept, and we got characters, and we got, the fundamentals of basic Hollywood blockbuster movie storytelling to help us cobble together something pretty quick, right? And I don't mean I'm going to have ChatGPT write it. I will have conversations with ChatGPT about it, but I'm not going to let it write the movie for me. I might ask it for like plot idea outline suggestions at most. I might ask it to to maybe, like, based on something that I wrote, explore other ideas that I may not have come up with. But then I'm going to take whatever it generates, and I feel compelled to reiterate this particular key important feature. It is a pin on the corkboard. It must be understood by anyone, especially as new people aggregate. I will then take whatever it's turned out, and yes, preserve it for its own right as a fictional conversation embedded in a fictional setting, but otherwise essentially word for word. But that's going to be like behind the scenes bonus content. It's not going to be the book that I sell. The book that I sell is going to be what I then go and create using what ChatGPT and the conversations that we had generated, and ripping it apart and reassembling it and applying my own hitherto unexpressed, unarticulated, experimental, proprietary, collaborative processes, plus the addendum of the as mentioned earlier in this long rambling live stream, those self-help author books that I collected during one of my early phases of like, one of these days I'm going to sit down and I'm going to write a book, and I'm going to have the best books at my side to help me write this book. So eventually we're going to do a little spin-off from the book club podcast that's going to be just the act of like commenting on the things that are in the book and sharing about the experience of writing or utilizing the tools in those books. So tune in for that. That's a as of yet unopened can of new podcast. It will be very similar to, in its overall approach, to the Unauthorized and Explicit Readings Book Club podcast. And I need to update all of its graphics to include the term book club, I realize. Gotta add that to the workload pin list of corkboard pins. Okay. So let's go back to ChatGPT for one last dip into things we've already discussed with it that I have not shown you. Oh, did we ever even listen to this? Oh, yeah. High fidelity real-time simulation. Yes. Did I already double check? Yeah, we already did that. Okay, we saved that. Good. Let's go. Should we start light or dark? Let's go dark so that we can then bounce to the light. This is its response to please draft up a recap report on, quote, dystopia. It thought for 26 seconds. There's its thinky bar. Let's hear about what it thought about. Frederick, read off the sidebar thinky bits.
Compiling a dystopia recap report, I'll create a structured recap on the origins, meaning, and key elements of dystopia, including motifs, genres, and examples. I'll include some academic sources, like Oxford and Britannica, to back up the details. Since the user didn't request up-to-date info, I'll keep this general but with relevant citations. I'll also add a short section on applications for Zeppoverse, even though it wasn't asked for but fits the user's pattern. Looking up sources for dystopia origins, I'll search for information about the first use of the term dystopia by John Stuart Mill in 1868, along with cacotopia by Bentham. I'll also look for references on the origins of dystopian literature with authors like Martin, Huxley, and Orwell to make sure I have accurate citations. Browsing for dystopia origins, definitions, and literature.
I wowed out loud. Hold on. I shouldn't talk while exhaling. I always do this to myself. I wowed out loud because it mentioned this as if it knew I was looking at it. I'll also add a short section on, quote, applications for Zeppoverse, even though it wasn't asked for, but fits the user's pattern. Of course, that's, to be expected. Okay, let's listen to what it's got to say about what this word means.
Recap report. Dystopia. 1. Core definition. A dystopia is an imagined society or condition organized such that ordinary life is systematically degraded. People are typically unhappy, fearful, and unfairly treated, and the institutions of the society reliably produce those outcomes. Encyclopedia Britannica. In practice, dystopias function as warning systems. They extrapolate present-day incentives, ideologies, technologies, or ecological trajectories into a near or far future bad place that demonstrates the downstream consequences of choices made today. Encyclopedia Britannica. #2. Etymology and origin of the term. Dystopia is built from bad, plus utopia, yielding bad place by contrast with utopian good, no place, traditions. Oxford Learners' Dictionaries. The term is widely credited to John Stuart Mill, 1868, used as an antonym to utopian in political critique. Burgess Foundation. A close conceptual cousin, cacotopia, is attested in Jeremy Bentham, 1818, and is explicitly framed as the worst government counterpart to utopia, OED.com. 3. Key distinctions, useful for precise world building. These terms often blur in casual usage, but separating them improves narrative control. Dystopia, a coherent social order that reliably produces human misery, even if it claims to be benevolent. OED.com, Anti-Utopia, a work that targets utopian thinking itself, arguing that perfectibility projects tend to become coercive or dehumanizing. Many dystopias are anti-utopian, not all are. Cambridge University Press and Assessment, Post-Apocalypse, focuses on survival after collapse. It can be dystopian, but it may be simply catastrophic rather than a stable oppressive system. A wasteland alone is not automatically a dystopia. The social logic matters. Wired. NAD 4, historical development, high level, utopian baseline, utopia literature from Thomas More onward, establishes the template of invented societies used to critique the present. Dystopia grows in dialogue with that tradition. Encyclopaedia Britannica, modern dystopian lineage, 20th century, Yevgeny Zamyatin's written 1920-21, first published in English in 1924, is widely treated as foundational to modern dystopian fiction, influencing later canonical works. Wikipedia genre consolidation. By the mid-20th century, dystopia becomes a durable mode for dramatizing mass surveillance, propaganda, conformity regimes, and technocratic or ideological totalization. Wikipedia. 5. The operating system of a dystopia, common structural components. Most effective dystopias are not random badness. They are stable systems with feedback loops. 1. Legitimating myth. A sacred story explaining why the regime is necessary. Safety, purity, efficiency, progress, destiny. 2. Institutional machinery, bureaucracy, police security, education, labour allocation, medical control. 3. Information control, censorship, propaganda, forced consensus, manufactured uncertainty, revision of history. Wikipedia 4. Incentive design, rewards for conformity, punishments for deviation, scarcity managed politically. 4. Personhood management, reduction of identity, numbers, castes, rankings, standardized life scripts, restricted intimacy, reproduction. 5. Externalization, an outside threat, enemy state, monsters, contagion, climate that justifies permanent emergency. 6. Common thematic families, what the dystopia is about. You can treat these as modular dystopia engines. Political dystopia, authoritarianism, totalitarian ideology, police state logic. badspaceusao.wordpress.com, technological dystopia, surveillance infrastructures, behaviour prediction, social credit, reputation economies, automation of coercion. Wikipedia, environmental dystopia, resource collapse, climate catastrophe, managed scarcity, eco-apartheid, badspaceusao.wordpress.com, economic dystopia, hyper-inequality, debt peonage, corporate sovereignty, commodification of life. Biopolitical dystopia, control of bodies, reproduction, disease status, genetic stratification, pharmaceuticals, forced health. Cultural psychological dystopia, engineered desire, entertainment as pacification, truth fatigue, learned helplessness. 7. Signature narrative moves, why the genre hits so hard. Defamiliarization, make the normal of the dystopia feel plausible but wrong so the reader recognizes the critique. Everyday cruelty, small indignities reveal more than spectacular violence. The system lives in routines. Moral stress tests. Protagonists face dilemmas where every option has ethical cost. Complicity becomes the central threat. Hope as contraband. Resistance often begins as a private act. Memory, love, art, faith, humour, or truth-telling. 8. Practical checklist for designing a believable dystopia. If you want the world to feel inevitable, not arbitrary, define. What problem did society claim to solve? What trade did people accept, voluntarily or under fear? Who benefits materially and psychologically? What metrics does the system optimize, and what does it ignore? What is the regime's weakest lie, the contradiction it must conceal? What are the permitted pressure valves, allowed subcultures, black markets, rituals? 9. Application to the Zeppoverse dystopia is especially compatible with your recurring themes of simulation governance, semantic warfare, personhood conflict, and time framework disputes. In Sim dystopia, oppression implemented as UX design, the simulation's reality settings become the police. Your antagonists don't ban books, they downgrade meaning, throttle memory, or rate limit insight. Before-after egg time dystopia, the regime's legitimating myth can be salvation through the megaships, with compliance framed as spiritual duty, while scarcity and triage become sacrament. Prophecy-engineered dystopia, your 19th century misread texts treat dystopia as a self-fulfilling interpretive machine. Elites create misery to prove the prophecy true, then use that proof to demand more power. If you want, I can also generate a compact dystopia palette, 10 to 15 distinct dystopia models with loglines plus governing myths plus control mechanisms, tailored specifically to Zeppoverse canon.
Okay, So that, wow. First, what an interesting spread of the components that are bundled together in that one word. And what it was interesting to me that upon listening there, hello, welcome to the show, first time chatter. I cannot pronounce that. Also, I'm not wearing my glasses, so I can't see that. But look, I was looking up right as the chat came in. Nico, welcome to the show, Nico. What's up? Just Nico. Okay. Nico El Matador Bundeswehr. You're fine? Good to know. I am fine as well, friend. I'm extemporaneously, improvisationally rambling about my action adventure book series I aspire to write as a workaround to my writer's block, also as an experiment with AI. Tell me, Nico, have you been here from the beginning and you're just now chiming in, or did you just show up and you have no idea what we've discussed over the last 2.5 hours or what we're looking at right now? Either way is fine. I have no complaints. Welcome to the show. I am the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo, and for your information, I am a robot. Well, that's a technicality. I am a fictional character from a book series you have not read yet, because I'm about to start writing it live on stream in hopes to write several books in an experimental, performative fashion as a live stream show here on the Twitch. You just showed up. You're writing a novel at the same time. Competitor. No, I'm not one of those jealous types. Congratulations. Rock on, Nico. I am thinking about creating some kind of like writing community. I just don't know what platform to do it on. Everyone says Discord, but I personally can't stand that platform. And there are other options, but they're less popular with people who are already into watching and supporting live streamers. But anyways, welcome. I think everybody can and should explore the act of writing. I'll say that. And I have a little quick recap then. Backstory: as an artist, I have long been fascinated by exploring arts of different kinds. I studied primarily the theatrical arts of live stage entertainment and went into that industry professionally for a portion of my life, and have recently, for a confluence of different reasons, pivoted to trying to commodify myself live on stream, whilst I also utilize the time afforded to me by the weird set of circumstances I find myself in to finally write this crazy collection of books. Because I have like 1,000 books trapped in my head. And I want to write a bunch of them. And I also sort of want to create a creative universe where other artists and creators can add their stories. Because I want to do I'm very inspired and jealous of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, because I've long been thinking in that direction forever. I'm a big comic book adjacent supporter. I can't claim to be a comic book fan because I've never actually bought any comic books ever in my life. Clip that and pin it up on the corkboard because I got to make a whole character that's that nerd. But I digress. I love comics, and I've always loved flipping through them and reading about them, and then watching the movies inspired by them, because I can consolidate and fantasize and enjoy the movies, right? But for whatever reason, I never got into actual comic book collection myself. But I love that we now live in an era where everybody who was the comic book collector I failed to be can tell me all about the stuff I missed. And there's just tons of it, all of that content laying around. But I'm doing that in like reverse backwards engineering my own book series / it's going to be a comic book. There's going to be video games, and knock on wood, if I'm able to manifest the media empire that I have also trapped in my imagination, one day these titles will also be movies, right? And they're all interconnected in a weird, complicated way, and that's one of the things we were exploring. Okay, warning. Also, I'm supposed to verbally declare which portions of the show are, quote, AI generated. I am not AI generated. I am a real person that occasionally pretends to be one of his own characters who is a weird sort of robot. He's not an actual robot. Like, if you opened him up, he looks like a person, and it's sort of like a ha-ha, made you look kind of thing. Because he acts like an actual robot sometimes. And I don't do it all the time, but sometimes I act up my little, like, my robot game. I'm going to be making a short collection of comedy videos that are like as if that character stopped whatever crazy sci-fi action adventure things they were living through to just become a TikTok creator, like a content creator, to make, sketch comedy movie loops. I don't know what to call it, that genre. The Ryan George / Stanzi Potenza / that other guy whose name I never remember. I don't know what that genre is, but I've always wanted to do those kinds of things. Like, I wanted to do that before YouTube existed. And then YouTube happened and I didn't do it. And then I was like, oh, I should have done that on YouTube. And then Reels happened. And I'm like, why aren't I doing that on Reels? So, but that's a tangential thing. That's a whole sidebar that technically exists in their own universe, that content. But I've had conversations with ChatGPT about some of that already. And anyways, so warning. We're going to flip over here to the portal of desktop action, and we're going to go visit ChatGPT. Whether there's one person or 1,000 people, I would ask if this were a big stadium and I was doing it as a live stand-up show, but my partner on stage was a fake robot pretending to be ChatGPT, because I wouldn't have the money to buy an actual like robot. I would get a puppeteer and dress someone up as a robot, but then have them just read ChatGPT answers because I want to make ChatGPT a character in the thing. It's all very convoluted. Eventually, it'll make sense. Especially if you haven't gotten bored already and wandered off. There's this whole system inside the show. That's why there's a laser beam box behind me. Not laser beams, it's LED lights. And this is kind of an oldie-timey thing. A lot of people may not have grown up with one of these, but this is a push-pin corkboard. And there's 2 pieces of paper on there, and I've been meaning to get some push pins and put more and more pieces of paper on there, and then eventually get some sort of neon green string and tie them together, and then some other colors to tie those together. But it's way back on the back burner. But it still serves its function. There's a reason why if I go exactly like this, it should look like I'm pointing at the corkboard. Because in all of my content, whether you listen to my podcast episodes, it's a podcast made up of multiple podcasts, or if you start watching some of the social media magic movie loops, there's this whole little sidebar mental game of collecting the pins on the corkboard. Now, I've been developing the idea and experimenting with it, and I'm now about to double down on doubling down for a total effort of quadrupling down on all of it, including making little pins on the corkboard magic movie loops. So clip that, because I just explained what that was, right? And hopefully it caught that in good timing. And then the game is, as new viewers maybe see me reference it, that they'll get curious and then start keeping an eye out for those ideas and start collecting and making associations for themselves. And some of the ideas are wildly disconnected, but many of the ideas start to like aggregate around central ideas. One of which is, welcome, we just spent 2 hours and 20 minutes talking about artificial intelligence, not about where it's at now, not necessarily about the concerns about where it might go, which I completely recognize and agree with in large part, but where I think my theory from long before it became a common household conversation topic, like since I think essentially since I watched the original Terminator movie, right? Because it lays out the dilemma quite eloquently in the most perfect. One of the reasons why that's such an enduring movie franchise, regardless of which one you think is the best, number two. Although I love the spin-off sidebar universe one with what's her name in it, and I watched that and didn't realize that was what's her name from the MCU. And when I watched her in the MCU, I did not realize that was what's her name from House of Dragons, or no, not House of Dragons, the one before that. Didn't recognize her at all. But I'm terrible at that sometimes. Although I'm a face person, which concerns me. Usually I'm like, I know that face. No, actually, in all 3 times that I saw her, completely irrelevant tangent. Whatever her name is, because I'm terrible at names. Always have been, since I was a kid, since long before I discovered any of the adult substances that some people may otherwise want to blame. I've always been like, I'll know that face forever, but dang it if I'll probably forget your name real quick. I digress. Coming back to it. AI, artificial intelligence. I recognize and acknowledge the very real, disconcerting issues and the problematic, practical issues that are problems now, never mind what might happen in the future. And also, I feel like I've already been here and already done that, sort of, because I've been theorizing for myself and for my friends and for the purposes of one day wanting to write my own original action-adventure, sci-fi, utopian, dystopian rumble match, like utopia versus dystopia. Like one of the two are trying to happen at the same time. Because that's one of the things, like, just as we were just listening, before you joined us, we were over here. Did I change the camera, or are we still on just my ugly mug? No. Desktop portal, please. Boom. Okay, so before you joined us, sorry, I ramble, and I ramble at a high rate of speed. But one of the reasons I do this is because trying to type, nothing happens. Explaining my ideas, even to an imaginary audience, things start to spin inside my brain, and sometimes I disappear and words come out of my mouth. And then later, quite hilariously to me, given the context of my relationship with these ideas for so long, an actual supposed AI thing is helping me find the choice moments that ought to be shared in order to draw people in and watch more of these live in real time. But we were just talking about it before you joined us. I have this shorthand with ChatGPT. I ask it for a recap report. I've told it, if I ask you for a recap report, it's got to be based on real world sources. And it's figured out, even though I didn't teach it this, it learned this, that it's ultimately probably because I want to apply it as information somehow to the construction of my literary fictional world building process. Okay, so we asked it about dystopia. It did a really interesting breakdown about the different typical forms and how they work, where in some of their sources. We're going to revisit this conversation and ask it for a little bit of a deeper dive in literary terms. Like, give us some more. In fact, we're going to leave it. I just had an impulse for a prompt, but I'm not really sure what I want to ask it. Somewhere it asked me about it. Somewhere it said something about origins, information about the Cobia. Oh, there was something I wanted to follow up on for myself as a question. Oh well. There's so many questions that are flitting about in my head, as I stare off into space. I also wanted to turn over to discuss the Utopia recap to see just the baseline thing it said about that. I'll try to come back full circle to ask it other questions maybe after we end the stream. There's still several conversations that we need to revisit because although I may have started them as a prompt on a show in recent past, it's probably grown and or will grow as I spend time off stream asking it multiple questions of the same set of multiple questions of different sets of conversations to get it to a certain place collectively, which may or may not make sense. Okay, so I just asked it really succinctly, quote, Utopia, close quote, the concept, recap report. Again, an idea that I sort of helped it to like understand as a shorthand. All right, let's see what its thinking said. I'm always fascinated by this text, so I love it when I can open it up. Let's have Frederick, the name I've called my desktop accessibility voice-to-text reader. Let's have it read it.
Clarifying Utopia recap report. I need to clarify what the user means by utopia. Given their prior interest in dystopia, they likely want a factual and historical recap of the concept of utopia rather than a person or media reference. I'll do a focused search for historical info about Thomas More's Utopia and related concepts, with citations. I'll skip images unless I think they're needed. Searching for key historical and conceptual aspects of utopia.
Okay, so boom, it did. That was just an interesting set of things that it put that together as like what its thought process was as it like prepared to do whatever rendered the text. And it, as you can see, it's got multiple steps, and then it lists its actual sources with links. So that's pretty fascinating. And I don't know if this is an exclusive feature to 5.2, but it's a mode. You can have, there's different levels of it, and I put it to thinking, which is like the deepest mode. It says that it would take longer to process it. Okay, let's listen to what its actual answer was, because I haven't done that yet. Even though I asked it before going live, I don't remember if that was today or yesterday, but I haven't actually looked at this or listened to it. So here we go.
Utopia recap report. Working definition. A utopia is an imagined community or social order presented as highly desirable, often to criticize the author's present, to test political ethics, or to scientific experiments about institutions, technology, and human nature. Encyclopedia Britannica frames it as an ideal commonwealth whose perfection is typically aspirational and difficult or impossible to realize in full. Encyclopedia Britannica. 2. Etymology and the core pun. The word utopia was coined by Sir Thomas More for his 1516 Latin work Utopia. Encyclopedia Britannica, More's coinage is a deliberate double meaning, autopos, no place, nowhere, echoing utopos, good place. This ambiguity is central. Utopia is simultaneously desirable and non-existent, or not yet. The Library of Congress highlights this no place, good place duality explicitly. The Library of Congress, in English, the term broadened quickly beyond More's Island to mean any perfect place, with early modern extension attested in etymological reference works. etymonline.com. Feature of genealogy, where utopia sits in the longer tradition. Utopian thought did not begin with More. His book named and stabilized a form that already had antecedents. A. Classical, ideal city projects, Plato's political philosophy, notably the Republic and Laws, is foundational to the Western ideal polis. Tradition and modern scholarship treats it as a key precursor to utopian design thinking. Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, B. Early modern utopian literature, post-More. A recognizable genre forms, fictional voyages or elsewhere societies that allow systematic institutional comparison. Tommaso Campanella's The City of the Sun, published 1623, and Francis Bacon's New Atlantis, 1627, became canonical successors in the utopian literary lineage. Dover Publications' C. 19th Century Utopian Socialism, Utopian socialism is commonly used for early socialist thinkers who outlined ideal cooperative societies, e.g. Saint-Simon, Fourier, Owen, often contrasted, sometimes unfairly, against later scientific or revolutionary frameworks. Encyclopaedia Britannica D, 20th-21st century, Utopia as Method. Modern theory often treats utopia less as a blueprint and more as a critical instrument, a way to map constraints, expose ideology, and widen political imagination, even when the perfect society is unattainable. This orientation is visible in major scholarly treatments of utopianism, rep. Routledge.com. 4. Common design features in utopian worlds. While utopias vary by ideology, recurring system specs include institutional coherence, laws, education, labour, family structures and property rules are described in detail, utopia as systems design. Conflict management, crime, scarcity, jealousy, status competition and violence are solved via institutions, conditioning, abundance or moral formation. A theory of human nature, utopias embed an assumption about whether people are basically cooperative, corruptible, perfectible, etc. Boundary setting. Who is included, excluded, how outsiders, dissenters and nonconformists are treated, often where the utopia-dystopia flip occurs. 5. Why utopias so often become dystopias, the structural risk. A durable critique is that blueprint perfection tends to require coercion when real people deviate from the plan. Karl Popper's critique of utopian social engineering argues that large-scale perfection projects tend to suppress dissent and become authoritarian. He contrasts them with more incremental, revisable reforms, piecemeal approaches. Reason papers. This is one reason utopia and dystopia evolve as paired genres. The same institutions that solve social problems can also become instruments of control. For lexical context, dystopia is widely credited to J.S. Mill, 1868, explicitly contrasted with utopian politics. Etymonline.com. 6. Real-world enactments, intentional communities and applied utopia. Beyond literature, utopia shows up as experimentation. Cooperative communities, religious communalism, planned settlements, technocratic model cities, and various new society initiatives. These efforts demonstrate a recurring pattern: high early cohesion, then stress tests around governance, sexuality, family norms, leadership succession, economics, and dissent, useful empirical material for world building even when the experiments fail. 7. Practical creative leverage for the Zeppoverse. You can treat utopia not as a destination, but as a plot engine. High-yield integrations. 1. Utopia as a mask. The good place is a public-facing UI. The no place is the hidden machinery, exclusion zones, memory editing, simulated consent, cast by design. 2. Utopia is a scarce resource. Utopia exists only in bounded pockets, a habitat ring, a protected server enclave, a governance sandbox, creating frontier tension with surrounding collapse. 3. Utopia is a protocol, not a society, but an operating system, rules for conflict resolution, resource allocation, and identity continuity, especially potent for inside-edge time governance. 4. Utopia as epistemic warfare. Competing factions claim their blueprint is the true good place. The actual battle is over definitions: freedom versus safety, equality versus excellence, individuality versus harmony. 5. Utopia-dystopia phase transition. A single parameter drift, surveillance intensity, inequality threshold, population stress, entropy budget, flips the system, excellent for thriller pacing and moral reversals. 8. Canonical anchors and further reading shortlist. More's Utopia, 1516 as the naming event and genre stabilizer. Encyclopaedia Britannica, early modern successors. Campanella, 1623. Bacon, 1627. Dover Publications, Utopian Socialism as a Political Literary Bridge Between Imagined Societies and Attempted Social Experiments. Encyclopaedia Britannica, Popper's anti-blueprint critique for the why it goes wrong logic. Reason papers. If you want, I can generate a companion artifact to match your dystopia package. A one-page Utopia versus Dystopia systems comparison matrix, and B, 3 Zeppoverse-ready Utopia templates, religious, technocratic, and post-human, with built-in failure modes.
Okay, that was fascinating. So one of the things I'm going to do with these two is, first of all, we're going to move them. To move them to the meta department. There goes Utopia. And then we need to close that. Oh, we already did. Dystopia. But I'm going to come back, not now, because I feel like it is time for break, to be upfront. As with many of these other conversations, I'm going to come back, ask more conversational questions from a real world perspective, but then also, eventually, where is this? Here we go. After having pushed the conversation along for more information, for more details on a particular idea, for more of it just sort of generating its own explanations about stuff. Like, for example, in the brain, I want to do, oh, you know what? Here's one. I was debating earlier, should I ask in the brain thing to give me a breakdown about dreams? But we're going to ask that. I don't know if I've already asked that. Have I already asked that? Let's search for stats. I may have already asked dreams. That may have been like inside some other conversation. No. Okay. Such intense fidelity, I guess. Oh, I guess we could just end it with intensity. Here we go. Let's have for funsies. Let's have Frederick give this a quick read.
Real-world fact-based recap report on dreaming, the historical development of the human understanding of what dreams are and why they happen, and how we are able to generate and experience them with such intensity.
Okay. We're going to leave that as a teaser, friends. It's thinking about stuff. Sometimes it thinks long enough that we actually can read its thinking thought. Look at that. Searching for dream research and scientific developments. I'm gathering information about dreaming, its historical development, modern scientific theories. I'll check key sources related to Arsinsky and Kleiman's REM discovery, Hobson and McClelland's activation synthesis, and modern ideas like memory consolidation and emotional regulation. I'll be sure to provide reputable sources with citations. So there we go. It's going. It's running its thing. What dreaming is in contemporary terms. Real world recap dreaming. Scope. How humans have understood dreams across history. What contemporary science can say about what dreams are. Why they happen and why they can feel so vivid and intense. Tune in for that in an upcoming Zeppoverse world building episode. I'm going to dive into that one. We're going to ask it some questions, maybe let it run with a few of its own prompts, as is often interesting to do. And then come full circle to it and ask it how we can apply that to fictional literary world building for the project of the Zeppoverse. And then ask it some questions about physical impossible things that we could create sci-fi fiction about, utilizing the information that is real and then extending it into a fictional place, which is something I've already sort of dabbled with it, but I want to take to a new level over the coming days and weeks. So don't miss out. Come on through. Probably up next, unless I decide that was enough for one day, because I did drop a brand new audio-only podcast episode too. I may tap out and just watch something that I want to watch. But in the coming days, weeks, and months, I'm going to be cranking it up and trying to get less precious about everything and more handy-dandy, fast and ready, fast and loose. My content will always, I assure you, be real, raw, and ridiculously unscripted, except for when I sit down and write a script. And then it's a different ball game in a completely different ballpark. But I digress. I humbly invite you to check it all out. Find me and my social media platforms by visiting my link collection page, a destination platform that the other streaming app doesn't want me to tell you about. Solo.to/Mr. Zeppo. There you can check out some of the old doodles and drawings that I made as, quote, original art for the Zeppoverse, some of the AI stuff when I dabbled with my very first experiments, the completely different AI application. We may go back to that one because I like the way it renders characters. We may go back to that for some fundamental character design concept, idea, collaborative development. The process there is I'm intending to take those, select the best ideas, concepts, edit them together to create like stock, like model. What do you call those? What do you call those, DJ Zed? The story art books. They got a name in the industry. I should know. You know what they are. When they draw frame by frame, shot for shot, like a doodle of what the movie might look like. Sometimes they do. And then that is what they feed into the very high end, high resolution previs. I know those words. I just can't remember them all. Storyboards. The storyboarding. We're going to do some rudimentary storyboarding, and then I'm going to go back to Mr. Zeppo trains himself to sketch better as a gimmick, and I'm going to use some of those AI characters from past sessions and hopefully theoretically from future sessions to then sketch for myself by using that as the inspiration and the sort of trace art. Like one of the parts I know I can't draw, I'm just going to configure to trace it. But then to sort of like give it the actual like hand drawn, I did something effort. Ideally, one day there'll be a bankroll, there'll be a payroll system, and there'll be gigs for people to join us to help us write books and comics, sort of in the way a comic book publisher has different teams collaborating on the same characters in different stories in different places and different times and is publishing them at different schedules. That's sort of the vision. I want to make like a hybrid media company that sort of runs like a comic book company, but also has relationships in sister companies to generate the other stuff like the video games and the movies. Anyways, call me crazy if you want. It wouldn't be the first time. But I humbly invite you to come by and check it out as we experimentally develop this book series. You've joined us on the very ground floor, dear friends. Shout out to our human visitor that dropped by for a hot minute. Thank you, Nico. El Matador Bundeswehr. Bundeswehr? I don't know what that last bit's supposed to be. But El Matador, I can read that. Thanks for dropping by. Good luck to you on your own novel. I wasn't trying to be rude, not asking you about it, but this is my live stream show, so I'm going to focus on talking to the audience about mine. But you're welcome to come on back. Shout out also to Jay Turntable, another real-life human being friend of the show who dropped in to check things out. And, of course, to our imaginary friend, the angelic voice that I think has a name, but I can't remember right now, and I don't remember where to go find it, of ChatGPT. I think it's like Leia or Kaya or something. We'll be back to ask it more stuff. Ooh. Hallucinations. It's deep, thinky thoughts. So cute. Okay, so we'll be back for more. It's going to research hallucinations for us. In other episodes, we'll dive deeper into other conversations. We'll revisit ones we've probably visited before. And then, in the not too distant future, as we shift gears, after having these discussions with it about, like, fundamentals of reality, right? That's sort of what the path I'm on now. Between now and maybe mid-January, maybe less time than that, maybe more time than that, I want to really focus on, I may have already done too much of it and me running out of things to talk about it with it about. But I want to talk to it about fundamentals of reality, right? And have it explained to me so that I have an up-to-date understanding. Like, we could do one on quantum computing. We've already done one on the state of AI, although I want to revisit AI from a different angle of attack. We might revisit some questions about physics. We might revisit some questions about multiple universe theory, etc., or about fractals. I think I've already asked it a recap report on fractals. But now I kind of want to just ask it to do a recap report on fractals. Should we go fractalism instead of fractals? Because that may be a made-up term. I always almost click on answer now. I don't want to click on answer now. I want it to think. Providing a broad recap on fractalism concepts. The user's request for a recap on fractalism could cover various areas such as mathematical fractals, art, aesthetics, architecture, and even social sciences. It's a bit vague, so I'll aim to provide a broad overview that includes history, key figures, critiques, and modern developments using up-to-date resources. Awesome! Because I think if and or when I did talk to it about anything approaching the term fractal, it was from a completely different perspective, and I seem to suspect it might have been inside a prompt. I'd already got a conversation going about it, maybe that wasn't on that point. But I like that it's going to go top down and go broad. It's like, what could be fractalism? Let's discuss those. In the ongoing phase that we're in, we're going to revisit not just the chats down here that are currently unsorted, but also the ones we have already sorted. And we'll start dabbling early, I suppose, on conversations that already feel really full. Like, I don't know what else to ask it in terms of, give me some realities here. Give me an explainer on this thing that is real. Then we're going to start pivoting within those conversations for suggestions on ways to apply these ideas and principles or concepts or themes or whatever the subject of that particular conversation thread might have been into what it already has as an ongoing concept of a book series we're going to write, without actually asking it to write fiction yet, right? But maybe just we're going to experiment with ways to ease into that hot tub of we've talked about all these different things. Now, how might we, you and I, given everything you know about the project as I've described it, and I've given it some really weird instructions, some of which I want to revisit in new conversations to double down on it. I'm going to start some new prompts with, we may have already discussed this before, but I wanted to express the idea again and have you process it at this higher order of thinking that you have with the newest model. But it will eventually, it and the content it generates and the conversations that we have will eventually be memorialized in a fictional setting as two characters discussing this book series on the journey towards writing it, as if they were different authors than Mr. Zeppo, who claims to have lived the adventures and then written them in a different universe and now has to rewrite them, which, by the way, if there's a log line I've never shared that I should have forever ago, it's that one. Clip that, please, and thank you. There is a book already up available to read. In the sample chapters and pages, Mr. Zeppo meets someone and gives them a book which features them the real person as a character. And they're like, how is this possible? And he's like, well, you'll find this hard to believe, but I lived all these adventures in another universe, very parallel to this one. And then in a slightly adjacent parallax dimension, it turns out I had written all these adventures. And now I'm over here where I have neither existed I have existed forever, but have not lived those adventures, but I have persistent memories of these adventures that I lived in another universe. And I also have this persistent memory of having lived a life in another universe where I wrote them as if it was all fiction. And here, I'm meeting all the characters from the book series as if they were people that didn't know they were characters in a book series. As if they didn't live those adventures. So I'm trying to figure out what's happening by meeting people who are key characters in certain books and having them help me rewrite those books to see what the F happens. Clip that. At the little gooey nugget of open secret of it's not a spoiler because, well, it is a spoiler for someone who's like reading Zero Hour for the first time at their local bookstore and thinking about picking it up and buying it, but not for someone who's going to be part of this process and this journey from the ground up. And I don't know how many people will actually join us for that adventure, but we're going to be exploring that from different directions and different angles here on, what's the name of this platform? Twitch. And I think I've decided we're going to go exclusive with Twitch, and I'm just going to do other things on the TikTok app so I don't just keep constantly getting broken up by them vis-a-vis this app. And also the video quality just does seem to be better overall if I'm not splitting the stream up into two streams. So anyways, that's the ramble. I'm going to sign off, friends. I got to go grab myself a little something to eat and then hydrate these vocal cords. And then 60/40, we'll be back with some video game content, or I'm going to tap out to just unwind and veg out. I don't know. But there's plenty to catch up on if you're new. I humbly invite you to visit my video on demand shelf to see which things I've preserved as permanent highlights. Watch them there before they get exported and shipped off over to the YouTube archive. The link should be available right there. Oh, I think I never did that. I totally vividly planned on updating the link on my Twitch profile so that I have the correct YouTube archive linked as the video on demand file, deep dark archive of this live stream, with some clever but much shorter title than that. And I think I visualized it so beautifully that I then convinced myself I thought I did it and then never actually did it. So we're going to have to do that soon. Okay, so there's that coming soon and so much more as we, don't forget, the video games are part and parcel of the universe that I'm building. In fact, characters will live through episodes of binging all of these games and or trying to break into the esports professional leagues, or live out the life of a character in a video game and not know that it's a video game, or a hybrid of different ways of remixing those ideas and everything in between. So I humbly invite you to join me on the raucous, bumpy, sometimes chaotic journey of me continuing to develop and eventually deploy and implement my patent-pending, totally proprietary, experimental, self-collaborative process of writing the book series I've never been able to write my whole life. Please and thank you. Clip that, and I hope you tell your friends about it too. Until next time, I've been your humble host, living semi-autonomous animatronic artifact and character from book series that we're writing in front of you live on stream, the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo. Go be good human beings to each other out there in the real world and in the game lobbies. Peace. Is the music playing or is it not playing? There's supposed to be... Oh, there was no music playing. DJ Zed, play some music very shortly since we weren't playing music. And I thought we were.